people think that they can prove God wrong by taking verses from the Bible that contradict each other. But I'm here today to prove that there are no true contradicting verses in the Bible. Although it may seem that way on the surface, if you read into it and if you actually understand what God is saying through the Bible, you're going to realize that there are no contradictions at all. So first verse I'm going to get into is in Matthew 5 and Matthew 6. In Matthew 5 it says, "Show your light to the world. Do good deeds to all around you." And then in Matthew 6, literally one page later, it says, "When you're doing good works, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give in secret, and God will reward you openly." So I was super confused with this. This was the first contradiction that I found. And I read it, and finally I asked God, what does this mean? And he explained it to me very simply. When you're the light of the world, and he says, put the light on the hilltop, he doesn't mean brag about the good works you've done. God actually means lead by example. He means do good works to everybody. Don't just do good works to your friends. Don't just do good works to certain people. Do good works everywhere you go and show your goodness to everybody. Don't tell people, don't use your words, use your actions to be a light. And then that falls right in line with when you do good works, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Do the good works with your actions, don't talk about your good works. Do it in secret because your actions speak much louder than your words. God only looks at your actions. Okay, contradiction number 2 is Matthew 24 and John 1. So contradiction number 2 is Matthew chapter 24, verse 36, and John chapter 14, verse 11. So in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus says he doesn't know the day or the hour of the second coming of the Son. Only the Father in heaven knows. And then in John 14, Jesus talks about how he and the Father are in each other and they live as one. So on the surface, this doesn't make sense. How can Jesus live as one with the Father if Jesus doesn't know that when his own second coming is? But this is a way deeper issue, actually, with Christian misunderstanding, because Jesus' second coming isn't like he's going to come and destroy the whole world. Jesus' second coming is all talked about in metaphor. It's talked about in the spirit. Jesus' second coming is a personal thing, which means Jesus will come to each person individually, and he will come back to this earth. And it says, you'll know Jesus when you see him. When Jesus appears to you, you're going to know it. This is a personal thing, and all the waves and the destruction that is supposed to lead up to the second coming, all of the one person will be plucked out and brought to heaven, one person will be plucked out, brought to hell. This is all personal traits within you. This is one sin will be plucked out from you, and one trait that you have will be permitted and brought to heaven with you. So this lines up exactly, and God the Father decides when you're ready to see Jesus, the second coming, when you're ready to be saved. So because people think Jesus and God the Father are the same thing, but it's not true at all. Jesus is a guide to the Father. He is the one who shows us the way to the Father and how to please the Father. This means the Father is the one who knows everything, who knows when everything will happen. And Jesus is the guide to him. But Jesus accomplished his goals and his mission and was granted all authority of heaven and earth. So they have equal power in contradiction number 3 is John chapter 1. It says that no one has seen God. And I'll tell you right off the bat, this is a translation error. If you go to the correct translation, the Passion Translation, the full sentence is, no one has seen the full splendor of God. And if we go to back to Exodus chapter 33, we see Moses seeing God's back and God's hand, but never God's face. It's very much clarified. He only can see God's back and his hand. And this is important because a lot of people point to Exodus chapter 33, verse 20. No man shall see God's face and live. Moses never saw God's face. He only saw God's hand and God's back. So again, no contradictions yet. Now on to contradiction number 4 is James chapter 1 verse 13. God doesn't tempt anyone. It's our own desires which lead us into temptation. And people often point to Genesis chapter 22 verse 1 where God tests Abraham. There's a very clear distinction by saying test and tempt. God tested Abraham by seeing if he would give up his son for God. And Abraham passed the test. But God never tempted Abraham to do sin. Next we have contradiction number 5, which is probably the most popular. So contradiction number 5, the most popular contradiction in all of the Bible, and this is what divides Christians so much. It's Romans chapter 3 verse 28. It says, we are made righteous through our faith in Jesus, not in keeping the law. And then if we look at James chapter 2 verse 24, it says, both faith and works are necessary to be seen as righteous. Faith without works is dead. So, what does this mean? So, what the Romans chapter 3 verse means is that believing in Jesus is what's going to save us and make us righteous. If you try and follow the law like the Jews have done for thousands of years, it's impossible. Instead of having to memorize every single little rule in Leviticus and Moses' commandments, it's much, much easier to become righteous by finding Jesus and letting Jesus guide you to God. Because Jesus can tell you exactly what you personally can do to please God. And in James, it says both faith and works are necessary. Faith without works is dead. It's because if you simply believe in Jesus and don't do anything, it's saying the same thing as Romans. If you have faith in Jesus, he's going to tell you to do things. He's going to tell you to do what you need to do to please the Father. And if you don't do these things, if you don't do these works, then obviously your faith is dead. You don't have faith if you're not listening to what God tells you to do. Next, this one's pretty funny, pretty tragic, but in Numbers chapter 23 verse 19, it says, God does not change his mind and does not lie. This is true, but people try and point out in Exodus that this is false. It says in Exodus chapter 32 verse 14, God relents his wrath from the people of Egypt. But then if you read to the end of the chapter, God unleashes his wrath on those same people. He simply wanted to let Moses see that those people deserved the wrath. He kept his word. The timeline just changed on when he would commit his wrath on those people. On to contradiction number 7. This is the one that was hardest for me to figure out. And it's between Ezekiel chapter 18, where it says, a child does not bear the guilt of his father, and a father does not bear the guilt of his child. And Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, it says, children are punished for their parents' sins for 3 or 4 generations. So, what's the truth? Are the children punished or not? Yes, the punishment is passed down to the children, because this is a little hard to understand at first, but bear with me. If a child is given autism because his father had committed the sin of divorce, for example, the child is actually being given mercy by God. Because if, let's say, a completely normal child was to have parents that were divorced, that child would become a child of the devil. That child would become evil because of their divorced parents, and they would commit great sin. But by a child being autistic, that child is carrying the punishment of their parents' sins, but they're actually being given mercy. For example, a drug dealer is going to have a child who has severe problems. So that child, if was not given severe problems, would have also become a drug dealer or an evil child of Satan, because their parents would raise them that way. You as a child take your parents' example, but that child's given problems, so they can't do that sin. And the beauty is, the child is not punished, is not guilty for the parents' sins. So that child has the opportunity to follow Jesus and to be actually healed of all their problems. If they do work for Jesus, they're going to be healed. And these children in Palestine, which are dying as babies, they're going to heaven even though their parents committed evil sins. And the punishment of dying as a baby is obviously tragic, but these children otherwise would have grown up with evil parents who would have led these children into sin, and these children would have committed great sin across the world and ended up in hell and led many others to hell. So contradiction number 8. This one's a pretty simple one. It's Judas or Judas fell on the ground and died. So in Matthew chapter 27, it says Judas hanged himself, committed suicide. And then in Acts chapter 1, it says Judas's body fell head first and burst open. But if you think about it, this is in chronological order. Judas hanged himself, and then after some time hanging himself, his head must have fallen off and his body fell to the ground and split open. Like, what do you think would happen to a body left hanging for multiple days? Next contradiction, number 9, is the second book of Samuel, chapter 24, verse 1. It says, God's anger incited David. And then if you turn to the first book of Chronicles, chapter 21, verse 1, it tells the same exact story, and it says, Satan incited David. Now, the stories are the exact same, so why is there this change? And it's because both are true. David was incited and wanted to count the men who can fight in Israel, which is the context. He was incited to do this by both God's anger. He was scared of God's anger, but also because Satan lived in him. So both are. Contradiction number 10 is Psalms chapter 104, verse 5. It says, earth will never fall apart. And then it says in Isaiah chapter 24, verse 19, earth crumbles. Everyone will experience the same fate. And these two things seem like exact opposites, but both of them are talking about personal self again, using the earth as a metaphor. And the first Psalms is talking about believers. The earth will never fall apart. Their life on earth will never fall apart because they have Jesus. They have God on their side. They're saved. But in Isaiah, it's talking about those who do evil, the wealthy, the rich, the poor, all sinners alike are going to crumble. It's talking about a personal circumstance, not about the earth as a whole. And finally, the last one, contradiction number 11, is in the very beginning of the Bible. Genesis chapter 6, verse 19 says, there are a pair of each animal is to be brought into Noah's ark. And then in Genesis chapter 7, verse 2, just like 1 or 2 pages later, it says, 7 pairs of each clean animal are brought into the ark, and 1 pair of each unclean animal is brought into the ark. So you can say, yeah, this is different, but this is simply a specification. Yes, it's true in Genesis chapter 6 that there is a pair of every single animal brought onto the ark. But for clean animals, there are 7 pairs of those animals, and there's only 1 pair of unclean animals brought onto the ark. So you fools who thought you could prove the Bible wrong, those are some of the most popular contradictions, and all of them you can see are on the surface seem like contradictions, but if you look a little bit deeper and if you ask God to guide you on the understanding and the meaning of these things, He's going to show you exactly how these contradictions aren't after all contradictions. The Bible speaks the truth, and there's only one word of God. God isn't going to tell 2 different prophets 2 different things. So next I'll be looking at contradictions and differences between the Bible and the Quran in a later video. And if you have any questions about contradictions in the Bible, leave them below in the comments.